Hi guys, welcome to Dreamforce. We're really excited to have you here today. My name is Jill Harrison and I'm with a company called Silverline. We're a consulting partner of Salesforce and I'm here with a longtime client and friend, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Steve Seiler and I am currently CTO at Stonebriar Commercial Finance. Been in the industry and working with Salesforce for about 12 years now, and this is my sixth Dreamforce, which I'm very excited to be here. Hopefully everybody's still having a good time on their third afternoon.
Everybody's faces look pretty fresh today. So before we begin, forward-looking statement, make your purchasing decisions based on currently available technology and all of that. I think one day I'm gonna get a tattoo of this, so I'll just hold it up. This session's gonna be full of jokes, so I'm gonna need more laughter than that. All right, so Steve, this is your sixth Dreamforce. Mine's lucky 13. So what's your journey been like?
It's been interesting. So like we tossed this slide up there because when I started working with Salesforce, there was a complete, it was a tough design and user experience to even like build out reports and dashboards and those types of things. So we just wanted to show the Wayback Machine of what dashboards used to look like.
And I think that this was actually what Salesforce used to look like back when Metallica played the first time. Anyone see Metallica the first time at Dreamforce? All right, we got some old schools in here. All right. So now, basically this session today, what we're gonna really focus on is thinking about user experience and teach you guys kind of a series of steps that you can take to really think about how to roll out Lightning and build apps that are really persona-driven. So what we're gonna do is kind of walk through a process that Steve and I have been through a couple of times together now to really think through your UX process. How many of you have an actual formal UX team or a UX role in your organization? Okay, cool. How many of you are aspiring UX designers? Awesome. Okay, cool. How many of you read a lot about UX? I'm a nerd too. Good, good. Okay. So what we're going to talk about is really the sort of Lightning journey and what UX tools you can use and processes that you can think about as you're actually rolling out new apps. Steve's going to do a demo of a really cool prototyping tool, and we're going to kind of talk and open it up for questions about how this is working in your organizations too. So we'll first talk about personas and why they're important. Talk about a research and interview process that you can use to really build out those personas. And then, what are you going to take us through today?
I'll take us through a little bit more of like the interview process and how to develop your prototype so you get the most out of interaction with your users. And then the two of us will have more jokes and talk through the iteration process, because oftentimes you don't know where you're going to go until you start this process and you need to iterate over and over again. So we'll talk through all of those things.
And please, if anybody has questions as we go along, stop us, raise your hand, ask questions. At the end of the session, we'll try to keep a number of minutes available for coming up and doing a little bit of mic Q&A in case people want to chat, or we'll just come around in the audience. Cool. So why is UX important first and foremost? There's a bunch of different buzzwords out there about user experience. Everything is customer experience centric. UX really at the heart of it, from my point of view and from Salesforce's point of view, is all about being human-centric, right? So in the past, we had these big monolithic apps that were all sort of constructed just for one individual purpose or functionality. Now with the Lightning platform, really they've chunked up the ability to develop into something that is much more responsive to the end user. And so why user experience is so important is because it takes into consideration how people engage with each of the apps that they're using day to day. So how is it usable? How does it support their day-to-day needs and sort of functional requirements? It also has in mind the accessibility, right? So how do they actually need to approach these kinds of functional requirements? Is it on a mobile app? Is it from a desktop? Is it...
And like what content can be surfaced over and over again that you can reuse and repackage in order to give that best user experience as possible?
Right. And one of the things that we've learned along the way relative to performance is that user experience must be tailored really to the individual that is performing those tasks so that their expectations are in line with the way that the technology should perform. We might be all trailblazing super hard this week, and we're really excited to be here, but at the end of the day, our users, as administrators, as consultants, they don't care as much about the technology. They just want to get their jobs done, go home to their families, and really kind of get on with their lives. So thinking about performance, the speed of which things happen, the sort of design and aesthetic around it, these are the kinds of things that they care about often. So user experience is very important, and the way that we've done at Silverline these kinds of projects to convert over into Lightning is starting through an evaluation and establishing personas to start to access the user experience process. Does anybody want to take a stab at what personas are? Anyone? In your organizations, how do you consider them? Representation of the user, absolutely. I think about them as like archetypes, right? They're archetypes, they're not roles, they're not profiles, they're not in your role hierarchy. It's a way that someone actually experiences using Salesforce.
And some of your users could exhibit pieces of those archetypes. So somebody might have a marketing specific component and a reporting specific component, and those are parts of their jobs, and you need to be able to blend those together and be able to. I keep going on reusability because it's very important, but being able to tailor so they can get both of their jobs done while using that persona.
Right. So if you think about a typical sales team, you have a bunch of different personas on a sales team that engage in their day-to-day work very, very different ways, right? You have your sales executive, whoever's in charge of the overall pipeline and health and revenue of the organization. You have managers that manage sales teams and actual field performers or inside salespeople. And then you have people that are in the field or they're maybe in the office. And the way that you actually think about constructing these personas is based on how do they perform their day-to-day job, what are their goals, what are their motivations, and actually help you as an administrator or designer in the process of tailoring your app to meet their needs. So, how do you build great persona profiles? On the chatter session, or the chatter feed of the session, we'll share all these resources, but there's the Salesforce UX team and their research team at Salesforce has actually put together these really cool persona profile starter packs that help you kind of get into the mindset of what they've done globally to poll all of the different kinds of people that are using the Salesforce application. And so when you're starting on this journey to build out your personas, thinking about these profiles as a living document that will ultimately become your roadmap or your sort of guiding principle for the app development that you do is a really important first step. So these are some ideas about how you can start to sort of prepare those persona profiles, thinking about, once you've identified somebody like, a junior banker or someone that's an inside salesperson, what are their key goals? Why are we doing this? What are their top activities?
What type of data do they need to enter into the system to get something out of it later? Or does somebody need them to enter that data and then hand it off as part of like a workflow process that you've built on the platform?
Right.
So it's very dynamic on what you can use, and it's not like product or cloud agnostic either. You can use pieces of like a sales process. If there's like case management and like Service Cloud type of component too, you can add a little bit more complexity to what each one of these personas is going to be responsible for, but then also loop it back in together to see the larger picture.
And so in building out a persona profile, you're kind of creating a roadmap, right, of what you want to go interview for. And in my personal experience, there's actually a really awesome app. How many of you have ever heard of Extensio? Anyone? It's a free web-based tool that's really cool. It's actually a nice sort of user experience in and of itself. But as you're actually putting together your profiles, your persona profiles, you can use Extensio to kind of map out these different categories of work, right? What are their goals? What are their activities? What does lightning success look like for them? What do they want to actually try and accomplish? So definitely check this out. This is one of the tools that I use, at least every week. And this helps also report back to your executive teams or your other, stakeholders in your organization about what you've found in your research process as we move forward. So the next step is the research and interview process. You've done your homework, you've done your preparation, you know who your users are, you know who you want to go actually talk to. How do you prepare for those interviews, Steve?
So understanding the way your business users are going to interact with the system becomes very important. So you want to do as much research as possible on not only what they're doing, so you can come into the room prepared, but also what the system's capable of. There's a lot of new functionality on the Lightning platform that previously you would have had to hire a developer to create like this dynamic page for something or other. But knowing how the system works becomes a little bit of the education. And I would recommend using Trailhead in order to figure out some of those things too. There's, I don't know if we covered the Trailhead trails for it, but that might be coming up. And for my experience for the interview process, it's not a one-size-fits-all, so doing like a group interview is different than having one-on-one sessions, and having a hybrid approach of being able to use any single one of those types of interaction with people will exhibit a different experience for them, and actually you can leverage it to generate buzz around what you're going to be doing. So it gives them a preview, it gets them involved with the process, and sets you up to be empathetic for whatever their needs may be.
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, sure.
In real life, we typically start meeting with one or a few users, right? And they're not specifically, like you mentioned, the components, they have multiple components of a given artifact. You said start to build your inventory. That's almost hard to do to begin with, inventory of personas.
Right, so the question for those of you in the audience was really around, it's hard to do the sort of one-on-one interviews or all of the sorts of preparatory work with the sort of groups of users that are your archetypes internally. So I assume the kind of question is like, how do you address that and how do you think about it maybe?
How do you even start with the inventory of personas? Because that's possibly
Oh, okay, so how do you start with the inventory?
start with users essentially, one another.
Right. So how the question is, how do you kind of compile that inventory of personas? Where do you start? In my experience, really, it's what Steve was alluding to is kind of mapping out what divisions of your company are using Salesforce, and then thinking about structurally what people perform which functions. So if you have a sales team using Salesforce, you have a pretty clear understanding of a business development person versus an inside salesperson versus a field sales representative. So think about it sort of abstractly in that sense of what people perform which tasks, and you can kind of create that map. I don't know how if you have tips
and it really depends on the function, because if you have a middle office team on Salesforce as well, that then becomes more of a workflow based. So I have a sales process that then hands off to middle office, and I need those personas become steps in the process as well.
Right.
So it really depends on your use case and who is interacting with the system.
Right. And so I think what we've learned over time is, engaging different persona types. Once you've created that map, your mileage may vary a bit depending on who you're interviewing and engaging in this particular part of the process.
And everybody says go to like your super users first. I would actually say not just them. Like the people that are skeptical about using the system and don't want to use it, you get a lot of information out of them, like, I do not use Salesforce because I can't trust the data, or it does not work for what I want it to do. So that can become part of your backlog of items that you need to overcome in order to be able to generate them actually using the system.
Right. And to that point, the way that you engage those users may be very, very different. So as a consulting firm, we often take our customers through like a workshop approach because we're doing the facilitation, right? We're coming in, we're helping everybody learn about the Lightning platform, what's new, what's coming, and kind of moderating that discussion. But when you're an admin on the inside, you can kind of take different approaches to get more information. So oftentimes in like those situations where you have maybe a naysayer, it's good to engage them one-on-one so that they feel very heard and they feel like they have their needs addressed without potentially sinking a workshop, right?
But in a workshop too, the naysayer can also, they could guide the discussion to where a lot more people are talking about some of the problems that they have, but making sure that you monitor and can guide that discussion. So some things you might want to table for later. Right. So you say, all right, great point, let's continue to move on, and be able to engage with them at a later time.
And so if you guys need some help kind of getting prepared for these workshops or interview processes, actually Salesforce has done a really cool job of putting together a whole kind of user experience Trailhead module series on this. And the user research basics, so each of these screenshots here, like the persona playing cards, the user experience research process, they've shared what they do at Salesforce via Trailhead, and I highly recommend taking all of these modules because they even give you a good starting kit for performing those user surveys and going out to talk to your users. So definitely
we'll
check this out.
post the links to these in the chatter group as well.
So in terms of thinking about the research and interview process, if you're conducting workshops, if you're conducting surveys, these are the things that I start with. It's really pretty simple, right? What do you do every day in Salesforce? How do you do it? Show it to me. I'm a very visual learner, so I like to have my users actually show me what they're doing and then give me color commentary on what works well, what doesn't work so well. I mean, you're gonna get a lot of feedback along that process. But to Steve's earlier point, this is also a really great opportunity to educate people on what new features are available in Lightning, right? Not everybody is reading the release notes and looking at Salesforce Live and doing all the trailblazing that we are. It's important at this point to really actually help them understand what something like an activity timeline could represent in terms of an upshift in functionality for them. And then also, I think about it as really get the users involved in goal setting. So help them understand, what are you trying to accomplish? Do you want to be more productive? Do you want to source more deals? Do you want to do you want to improve your customer experience in a support center? How are you going to do that? Get them thinking about these bigger picture ideas so that you can tie your roadmap for Lightning back to the functional improvements that you're making day to day. And my last piece of advice is be really, really intentional in that workshop planning, because you're going to get so much feedback. And I know you've had that experience, so I'd love for you to share.
Yeah, when we rolled out Lightning, we made sure to let people know that it was a first draft and be able to deliver functionality as we went. So, all right, so this doesn't work today, but we will definitely have it done by Monday morning. And be able to turn that around and actually hold yourself to that. I know everybody is balancing the regular job, and if you're considering converting over to Lightning, doing that at the same time, but also understanding that, all right, well, I can't do that request for you in Classic, but I can do it in Lightning, so if you give me a little bit extra time, I can go ahead and get that done. So that's a little bit more of a carrot approach to be able to engage with people to say, hey, there's something better, there's something else coming.
And so this part of the research process is really helpful in socializing that. Personal tip here is that really when you start this process, start with the fun stuff, show them the flashy new Lightning features and components just to get them engaged and kind of on the same narrative with you, get them excited. So really doing show and tell here, using Trailhead, using the release notes, even just splashing up big presentations with just visual UX ideas is really, really great. And then finally, I mentioned this earlier, around the sort of goal setting and getting people engaged with that process. These are just a few kind of areas that you can orient those conversations around with your users to really help them think through, okay, if we're reinventing, if we're getting creative with how we actually build our apps, which things here on this sort of dartboard of business goals are we trying to establish in order to kind of guide the next generation of the application that we're building out? So is it, like I was mentioning earlier, productivity? Is it predictability? All of this. I don't know if you have, do you have insights into what you guys have done to orient your users?
This is where you can go ahead and get all the people involved to basically vote up what's important to them on a daily basis. You can also attack it from the opposite way, where you're looking for executive sponsorship, and you can say, all right, so with this project, we would see this one outcome, and is that important to you or not? And then you can reprioritize what you're going to do based off of that experience.
Great feedback. So how do I synthesize the findings? You're going to get a ton of feedback in this process. Your users generally tend to be an opinionated bunch. Yeah, some head nods. Okay. Make sure to go back to that persona profile and really kind of update what you've heard so that you yourself have this kind of vision map, right? And you're thinking about, again, from the user's point of view, what do they need, what do they want? In this stage, usually I will add different categories to that actual persona profile because you'll find out other tangential or anecdotal information along the way. So to Steve's point, if you're talking about a process, maybe the process itself needs improvement, right? Maybe you're uncovering through the technology that there's maybe a gap in how the business is actually addressing a certain problem. So think about process or workflow enhancements that might have nothing to do with Lightning. Think about, those technical risks or considerations that you uncover. Maybe there's an app that your users are using that is not Lightning compatible yet. And then, just kind of update that profile so you're staying organized.
Even last week, I was talking with one of my executive leadership, and he was like, it would be great. It'd be great if we had this one thing. And I was thinking to myself, man, I wish you would have told me that like 5 months ago, so I could have just built it out for you instead. So
that's the research process.
Yeah. All right, prototype development. This is the fun part. My undergraduate was in graphic design, and I never thought I would be using this ever again, but I am now. So. How many of you have ever gotten something from like the head of sales or something like that, where they give you like a chart on the back of a napkin or a back of a piece of paper, and they're like, do this, and you're just like, oh, I can't read your handwriting. So there's tools out there that you can use in order to try to bring that to the forefront to represent what they're going to see visually. First and foremost, the Lightning page builder is so much easier to use once you, it's a steep learning curve, but once you get your feet wet with it, it's much easier to use. But we're going to show you a different tool as well that maybe you can get a little bit more creative with it. So this was actually a use case that we used for our head of sales. He needed to see how his team is doing, if he needs to intervene on a deal process in order to get something broken loose, those types of things, see general performance of his team. So we were able to do that quickly, and this was like pipeline management type of thing that the back of the napkin from the previous slide became this very quickly because he had a point of view. I actually had data to back it up as well. Which is sometimes nice, but sometimes you don't have that, which is why we're going to do a demo of this other tool. It's called Avoni Creator, and I'm probably not going to do it justice. I think they're here somewhere in like the expo or something like that, but I would definitely reach out to them to be able to have what they're talking about, or have them show it to you, because we had a discussion with them, and there's so much functionality to this thing that you're just like overwhelmed. But what it does is I can go and click New Design, here. And
Which one do I hit? 2,
number 1.
1. Which number do we hit? 2? Just hit them all.
No? No? There's no 6.
11. Turn it to 11.
I'm on the laptop.
1.
Sorry, everybody. This is what you get with demos. Yeah.
Sure.
So obviously, this is all the process in itself.
Right.
What are some valuable arguments that you can make to stakeholders who want everything up and running right away as far as
Sure.
building out the timeline and expectations?
So what are the valuable arguments that you can, or value propositions that you can make to your executive team, right? So I think, Salesforce has done a really great job of kind of marketing what the power of Lightning is in terms of the industry focus on productivity or sort of the rapid nature of being able to build new, apps quickly. So I think what's been most compelling in my conversations with customers is how do you, and with executives in particular, how do you express to them that the intent of the application upgrade, more or less, because this is really the first time Salesforce has sort of upgraded its platform, is all to be focused around productivity. So if you can tie a direct line between the tools that your users are using and that sort of sales productivity or customer support productivity, if they can handle more cases or address more opportunities more quickly, then you're essentially trying to build the case for ROI in your organization, right? So productivity has been like the most sort of critical mass use case that I've talked to executives about.
And one of the use cases around that, I'm half listening, is like, let's say you always get the same report request all the time. You can embed a report chart in a record page itself that's contextually saying, all right, this is what the values are for this record, this account record. So I have how much sales we've had with that. And you can basically spoon feed to your users, this is what you've been asking me to do every single time, every single week for the last 3 weeks. But now everybody has that experience, and one person has requested that, but now all your users be able to get to use that piece of functionality at the same time. So it kind of builds on itself. And then through the process itself of I want it now, you can prioritize. All right, so I know you want it now. I can give you 50% of that, and I can give you a little bit more as we go and go and go. Get really good at using this 50% first, and then we can move forward.
And as Steve gets the demo started, I think it strikes a chord with the business executives when you can create this sort of case for partnering with the business to really truly build out the apps that they want, right? So it's starting that conversation and like making it a more collaborative like app development process. So that strikes the chord. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, back to the demo. So this Avoni Creator basically gives you all of the Lightning Design System components in itself, and you can go and build anything that's Lightning based here. You can do like a flow, which is like a wizard and survey. If you're using like Community Bolt, Lightning Bolt, you can develop what it's going to look like here. I'm just going to go to the Lightning page to try to emulate a little bit of that homepage. So you have many different types of pages that you can use here. Like if you have an account page or an opportunity page, you can go here, and the Avoni Creator will actually create the default of what you get whenever you flip the switch on Lightning. I'm just going to do homepage and create a new one. And what it brings up is an editor of whatever the home page usually is. Not happening here. I'll go back to this one. How about that? No? None of it?
The demo is doomed, you guys.
It's fine. But here's what the options you have in order to pull things on. So if I want to do like a layout piece, I can drag a 3-column layout here. I can add report charts as well. And pull those pieces in. And remember I mentioned before, I had data for my one use case, but oftentimes you don't. And it drives like the question of, can I do this type of thing or not? And you can get information up here that like somebody can get the idea of what you're trying to do. One thing for myself is I like to demo functionality of how things are going to work and how you're going to interact with things. So I can add buttons here, and from this button I can say, hey, this is going to be a proposal. So if this was an actual homepage that came up like it was supposed to, they're going to use the homepage as the springboard for their day. And I can say, all right, for proposal, I can give it an action. So I personally like these modal options in Lightning, which is basically like a pop-up, so you don't have to go to a record, have it pull down all the information about the record. I can have a modal, and I can start dragging information over onto that modal itself. So I can say, hey, I'm going to add a drop-down and a text area and really see what that's going to look like. Like, I don't know if y'all like to have fun. I can change the information here of what this is going to interact with. And the interesting about this tool is that then you can go into like a preview mode. So this is when you're presenting back out to your executives, you can say, this is how it looks, this is how it's going to interact. The really interesting thing for myself, because I try to code all the time and I'm the worst at it, and I am not good at all, I'll just admit that one right there, is it actually gives you some of the code that you can look at, and you can bring this into your like sandbox and your org in order to be able to start developing as a developer. We never had like a full developer team in our team. So being able to have something like this that allows me to start with the Lightning design system and start with an action that I can do, it gives me so much more of a use case and further along the path than I thought I would be able to get to before.
How do you show these prototypes to your users?
You can have them log in here. You can have it through one of those sessions. It really doesn't matter. They have a collaboration tool on it if you would like to use it there too. Again, I would recommend you to reach out to Avoni themselves.
Cool.
And sorry it didn't come up the way it was supposed to come up, but demos. All right. Let's float back.
Cool. So definitely check these guys out. They're super cool. There's also, if anybody is familiar with Sketch, and there's actually a really cool Lightning design system sort of plugin for it too. This tends to be more gold standard in like traditional web development applications and all of that. And so this tool is really powerful. It's not quite as dynamic and focused on the Lightning system as the one that Steve showed, but it's super cool. And I know you had some tips for us. You shared some of these, but...
Yeah, so you want to talk to your people. You want to make sure that you're not going down a rabbit hole of requirements, and you just want to keep it light and keep it precise of what you want to get done out of it. You want to make sure that you educate yourself beforehand so you can guide that discussion to where you need it to go.
Mm-hmm. Great. So now that you've built some prototypes, whether you're using Avoni or you're using Sketch or whatever, or napkins, How do you get the most out of them? So let's talk about this for just a second before we wrap. Really, how you get the most out of these prototypes, you want to engage your users in a very, very collaborative discussion. You want them to make sure that they understand that you're trying to be empathetic to their day-to-day experience, right? That you understand that they have these sorts of business challenges and you're trying to help them, you're trying to address them. That really helps boost adoption at the end of the day when they feel like they're participating in that process. I think, the shared ownership, and to your point, Steve, when you guys rolled out as sort of like a rough draft, you got a lot of enthusiasm and sort of a sense of ownership.
People were ready to flip over, even though change is very scary. And you need to be able to allow people to transition too, because they're not going to jump in and be able to use everything the way it needs to be used.
And I think
there is a transition.
Everybody wants to get creative too. They see people building apps, they see the industry, they don't know how to get involved. This can sort of give them access to a little bit more creativity in their day-to-day. So definitely engage these users and kind of give them the time of day as you're building out your apps. So, how do you help drive user experience decisions? When you reach an impasse, what do you do?
You reach out to your people and try to mediate between what's the best thing that you feel. So you in your own orgs are your
change agents?
I guess. I was going to say
trailblazers? Trailblazing?
You're the one who understands how Salesforce works, and at the end of the day, what needs to be done. Yeah. So you're the I'm losing it. It's late on Thursday.
You're their guide, right? You
Right.
are their guide, and it is important to help them constructively go through their decision-making process. And I think in this part of the step, it's really help them understand what goes above the fold, what is sort of buried in the details, what do they have access to your point, through modals or really sort of visual elements in the app that can help them get access to what they need to do in the org today.
Yeah.
Cool.
I agree with all of those.
So the next steps, key takeaways, really, we want you guys to kind of get engaged in this process and start to think about who your personas are. So definitely take these Trailhead modules and start to think about the different teams that use Salesforce in your organization, and really figure out who you want to go interview. Get that sort of roster of people that you want to go poll, both the power users and the people that tend to be the naysayers. Socialize the intent of your experiment, right? If you're going to go build prototypes and you're going to engage these users, make sure that they understand you're trying to help everyday life for them, right? And then really come prepared. I think Steve has made a super great point that do your research, get prepared, and start making recommendations, because people really sort of appreciate that thoughtful intention as you're going to build these apps. Any other key insights?
No, I think I've given enough color commentary for today.
Okay.
But we will take Q&A, and if you want to come up to the microphone, thank you, everybody, for attending the session.